So in this duotone approach, in this cut edge, I'm actually just erasing away whole clean selections that I'm drawing. And wherever I erase, it will look like there's a shadow because I'm letting the underlying layer come through. So I'm going to call this layer my duotone highlights. And this is, for now, very hard-edged and sharp. Now let's see what it looks like on the arms here and on these muscles. So the underside of the pec here. And into the rib cage. I want to make that a shadow. The underside of the arm spilling onto the bicep. Give that a slight shadow shape. And it'll start to help round out your forms. It's just a simple effect. The cast shadow of this harness, I'm just carving away. I can do it with a hard-edged eraser tool as well and paint it, but I like using the lasso because it makes me think of how everything connects. Just big color shapes. And try not to make them too complicated or overthink them too much. Help separate some of these fingers. And just a little bit of shading. Now, this is very much a caricature of Vladimir Putin. And he doesn't have six-pack abs in real life, though I'm sure he would love to have them. So he's not going to have them here. But you're using color in a way to, just like you did for coloring your logo, to strengthen your ideas. Strengthen your visual communication. And digital coloring is different than digital painting in that digital coloring always happens behind real or implied line work. So even if I color and end up replacing all of the line work with color, if I still have line work, it's digital coloring. If I get rid of that line work and I'm just filling it in with just shapes of color, then it's digital painting. So this starts to look like a digital painting. But as long as I have this line work in some form, it's digital coloring. And there are certain kind of disciplines that we can draw from that help us understand that. And this is called duotone hard edge in animation. Cell shading. Now, when you just have flat color on its own, you aren't introducing any new shapes into your composition. But when you're doing duotone coloring, the colors themselves create new shapes in your picture. So like the shape of that shadow, the shape of this shadow. And so you want to make sure they fit with your line work, that they're not more complicated than your line work. and that they enhance it. Now, the other thing I like about doing it this way with the erase, or just erasing away from selections, is that I can do it with multiple colors at the same time. So let's say I take this core shadow from his knee, and then I also want to extend it into his bare fur briefs here, and the other leg. I can do all of that by just cutting out one shape where I want the shadows to come through. And I'm using my color guide as kind of a plan, my little color test. But it all makes a certain sense of light logic. If the light's coming from above, it's going to show the texture of this bear fur, and it's going to show on the upper legs in that way. And then when I delete, it'll take it from all those colors at once. Same way, maybe make a little band of shadow on the edge of the bear fur here. And where the hand is. Now, traditionally, duotone is just lighter and darker versions of the local color. So that's my local color. This is just adding in the lighter versions of that color. But you can see how effective that is at bringing instant dimension. All of this does take time. None of it's easy. And to do a good job, you have to be patient with it. Now here on the boots is where it's possibly the most important to really get the dimension of those feet coming forward. And to see if it's even possible with just duotone to do that. We're almost there. And then on this little emblem, at the edges of it, I want it to get darker. At the corners. And honestly, that red is probably just too saturated, so I might replace that red. Select it and just adjust its levels, make it a little bit darker. That's a very strong color, so let's go right to hue saturation. And dim its lightness. And dim its saturation a little. So the local colors you choose, that's why we do it first. Those are very important. Those dictate a lot of other things that come. All right, so now we just don't have duotone color in the Ritz crackers yet. And those are a little bit more intimidating to me. Figure out where the shadows should go on these crumbly crackers to make them look like crackers. So I'll just take it a little bit more randomly. Use my color guide a little bit. But if the texture of the surface is more broken up, then your duotone coloring shapes, shadow shapes, highlight shapes should be more broken up. Now to show this broken Ritz cracker, which you can think of as Crimea. This is Ukraine. He's broken off his piece of Ukraine for himself. Getting very political here. I want that cracker to stand out more than the others. And so in my color comp, I let its highlights be brighter. And I could do that same game here. And I'll show you, once you have the colors down, once you have the shapes down, you can always modify them very easily in digital art. It's one of its strongest advantages. And that's why we learned all our compositing first, so we know how to manipulate color and values, saturation. We can always add that in as part of our use of imagery. So remember, I'm not painting anything, I'm just erasing away from existing colors. And I can duplicate and I can modify. So all these colors I'm using are just a levels adjustment of my local color to make them brighter. So once I have my shapes, if I want to make the Ritz crackers more saturated, the shadows deeper, the highlights brighter, that's easy to do once I have the shapes. All right, so now let's see what that looks like. The different backgrounds. Yeah, those colors are reading pretty well. Now let's do a duotone shadows. So I'm going to take my flat color layer, which again is this, duplicate it again. And this time I'm going to turn on my duotone highlights layer so I can see it, but take that flat color layer, do a levels adjustment to it, and push it darker. And I like that. And you see that makes a big difference. It's pushing those duotones a little bit darker. So that's classic duotone coloring. If I wanted to play with, I'll call this duotone shadows. And if I wanted to play with the other features of it, like its saturation or color balance, generally you would make your shadows less saturated. I can play with it that way. But I can also even shift the hue a little bit. These are all options I have. And I can blend it in with the flat color underneath if I need to. So that's looking pretty good. So now we get to the other type of duotone. And just to show you what that's like, I'm going to do a new layer that's just an empty blank layer, and we're going to call this soft-edged duotone. And all soft edge is now that we have our lights and darks, I can change my brush from being a hard edge brush to a soft edge brush, and I'll show you that on the next demo.